My name is Margaret Ann Holloway, and for 79 years I've called Cedar Bend, Iowa home. You ever been to a place so still that you can hear your own heartbeat echoing off the walls at night? That was my life. Every single day felt like the one before it. Until the day I did something I'll never forgive myself for, something that changed everything. I wasn't born angry. My mother used to say I had the sweetest disposition of all her children, but grief has a way of twisting you up inside, turning your heart into something hard and cold. I lost my husband James to cancer in 1987. Watched him waste away in that hospital bed. We set up in the living room because he wanted to die at home. Then, in 2003, my daughter Sarah, my only child, she was taken in a car accident on Highway 30, just 15 miles from our house. A drunk driver crossed the median on a Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday, the day we always had lunch together. After that, I stopped believing in much of anything. My house became a tomb. I'd wake up, make coffee, stare at the walls, and wonder why I was still here when everyone I loved was gone. The neighbors stopped coming by. Even Pastor Holland quit calling after I told him I didn't want to hear another word about God's plan. In my garden, beneath the old willow tree that James planted the year we got married, there was a statue of the Blessed Mother that my grandmother brought over from Ireland in 1923. She was beautiful, about 20 inches tall, made of painted plaster that had weathered over the years. Her blue robes were faded but still visible, her hands outstretched in blessing, and her face had this serene expression that used to bring me peace. Right next to her stood a wooden cross, maybe 18 inches high, carved from oak by my grandfather's own hands before he passed. My grandmother told me once, when I was just a little girl, "Margaret, when the world gets too heavy, you kneel before her. The Blessed Mother knows a thing or two about losing a child. She carry your prayers straight to her son." But after I buried Sarah, those words felt like lies. Pretty lies that people tell themselves to sleep better at night. It was a bitter cold evening in November 2019. The kind of cold that gets into your bones and won't let go. The wind was howling, something fierce, rattling the windows, and the lights kept flickering. I stood at my kitchen window with a glass of whiskey in my hand, staring out at that statue and that cross in the garden, and something inside me just snapped. I grabbed my late husband's old work gloves and a shovel from the shed. The ground was already starting to freeze, but I didn't care. I picked up that statue of Mary first, lighter than I remembered at maybe 10 or 15 pounds, and then grabbed that wooden cross. My back was screaming at me. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. I dug a hole right there at the base of the willow tree, deep enough that nobody would ever find them. Before I pushed them in, I looked at that peaceful face one last time, and I said, "If there's really anyone up there listening, if your son really cares like they say he does, then prove it. Climb out of this grave. Otherwise, stay buried like everything else I've ever loved." Then, I covered them both with dirt and dead leaves, and went back inside. That night, for the first time in 16 years, I didn't cry. I felt nothing, just empty. The next morning, I woke up and the house felt different, heavier somehow, like the air itself had turned to lead. My coffee tasted like metal. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder than it ever had before. I told myself it was just my imagination, just guilt playing tricks on an old woman's mind. But then my neighbor, Dorothy, who'd lived next door for 40 years, stopped me at the mailbox one afternoon. She looked pale, her hands were trembling. She said, "Margaret, I don't mean to pry, but something feels wrong near your property. Every time I walk past your fence, I get this terrible headache, like something's pressing down on my chest. Are you all right?" I just smiled at her, that fake smile I'd perfected over the years, and said, "Dorothy, It's just an old woman's garden, nothing but dirt and memories." But she was right. Things were wrong. The willow tree started dying from the inside out. The leaves turned brown in the middle of spring. Flowers I'd planted for decades refused to bloom. Even the birds stopped coming to my yard. At night, I'd hear sounds I couldn't explain, like something scratching at the foundation of the house. My joints, which had always given me trouble, became unbearable. Some mornings I could barely get out of bed. The worst part was the silence. My house had always been quiet, but this was different. This was the kind of silence that presses in on you, that makes you afraid to breathe too loud. I started leaving the television on all day just to hear human voices. Write in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know who's listening to an old woman's confession tonight. 3 months went by like that. Winter turned brutal. We had ice storms that knocked out power for days. I sat in my dark house wrapped in blankets, listening to the wind howl, and I started to wonder if I'd cursed myself, if burying that statue of the Blessed Mother and that sacred cross was the final straw that broke whatever fragile protection I had left in this world. My sister Ruth called me during one of those storms. She lives down in Florida now, has for 20 years. She was crying, telling me the doctors found something on her heart scan, an irregularity they couldn't explain. They wanted to do more tests, maybe surgery. I remember holding that phone and feeling absolutely nothing. Not fear, not concern, just this vast emptiness. I told her I'd pray for her, but we both knew I was lying. I hadn't prayed in so long I'd forgotten how. That conversation haunted me for weeks, not because I was worried about Ruth, God forgive me, but because I realized how far gone I really was. When you can't even feel fear for your own sister, when you can't summon up enough humanity to care whether she lives or dies, you know something inside you has died too. The mailman stopped delivering packages to my door. He'd leave them at the gate instead. When I asked him why, he just shrugged and said the walk up to my porch made him uncomfortable. Said he couldn't explain it, just didn't feel right. Even the teenagers who used to cut through my yard as a shortcut to the high school found a different route. My house was becoming an island, a dark, lonely island that nobody wanted to visit. Then, one night in early February, I had a dream, but it wasn't like any dream I'd ever had before. It felt more real than real, if that makes any sense. I was standing in my garden, but it wasn't winter anymore. The willow tree was green and full, the way it looked when James first planted it. The sun was shining warm on my face, and there, standing beside the tree, was a woman, not the plaster statue, but a real woman, dressed in robes of the deepest blue that seemed to shimmer like the night sky full of stars. Her face was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, not beautiful like a movie star, but beautiful in a way that made you want to weep, like looking at your mother's face when you're a child and you just know that you're completely safe. She looked at me with eyes so full of compassionate hurt, and she spoke. Her voice was gentle, like a lullaby. "Margaret, my precious daughter, you buried me in your pain, thinking I had abandoned you in yours, but I was never gone. I stood beside you when James took his last breath. I held Sarah in my arms the moment she left this world and brought her home to my son. I have been with you every single night. You cried yourself to sleep, you buried plaster and wood, but you can never bury love. You can never bury mercy. This life you're living, it's not a punishment, it's a journey, and every soul who walks, it carries scars, but scars are proof that you survived, that you loved deeply enough to hurt this deeply. I know what it means to watch your child die, Margaret. I stood at the foot of the cross and watched mine suffer. Your pain does not offend me. Your anger does not drive me away. Come home to me, child. Dig me up, not from the ground, but from the hardness in your heart. It's time to live again. I woke up gasping for air, my face wet with tears. The room was freezing, the heating had gone out again, but there was a smell, the unmistakable scent of roses. In February, in Iowa, in a house where nothing bloomed anymore, I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, and I just knew. But here's the thing about knowing something and doing something about it. They're two completely different things. I spent the rest of that night arguing with myself. Part of me wanted to run out there right then and dig up that statue and cross. But another part, the bitter, angry part that had kept me alive all these years, whispered that it was just a dream, that I was a foolish old woman losing her mind. The sun came up and I made my coffee, sat at the kitchen table like I did every morning, but I couldn't stop thinking about that dream, about her face, about the way she said my name, like I was precious, like I mattered, about her words, that she knew what it meant to lose a child. The Mother of God understood my grief in a way nobody else could. I spent that whole day pacing my house, looking out the window at that willow tree, remembering the sound of James's laugh, the way Sarah used to dance in the kitchen while I cooked dinner, the way my grandmother would kneel before that statue and that cross, her rosary beads clicking softly between her fingers, telling me stories about the old country, about faith that could move mountains. By evening, I'd made my decision, but I was scared. What if I dug them up and nothing changed? What if it really was just a dream, and I was just a crazy old woman talking to plaster and wood? What if I'd destroyed something so completely that it couldn't be fixed? But then I thought, what if I don't try? What if I spend whatever years I have left in this darkness, in this silence, because I was too proud or too scared to reach out for grace? I got dressed before dawn the next morning, didn't even wait for the sun to come up. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely tie my boots. I went out to the willow tree with that same shovel. The ground should have been frozen solid. We'd had below zero temperatures for weeks. But when I stuck the shovel in the earth, it went in easy, like the soil was soft and ready. I dug carefully, almost afraid of what I'd find. And then I saw them, the statue of Our Lady and the wooden cross. They were right where I'd left them 3 months ago. But something was impossible. There wasn't a speck of dirt on either of them. The Blessed Mother's blue robes looked freshly painted, brighter than they'd been in decades. Her face was radiant, like she'd been protected under glass instead of buried in frozen ground. And that wooden cross, the one my grandfather carved over 100 years ago, it looked like it had just been polished. The oak grain was clear and beautiful, not a single crack or stain, no rot, no decay, nothing. It defied every law of nature I knew. I fell to my knees in that dirt and I wept. I wept for James, for Sarah, for all the years I'd spent angry at a God I thought had forgotten me. I wept for the bitterness I'd carried like a shield. And I wept with something I hadn't felt in so long. I barely recognized it. Relief. I picked up the statue first, so light in my hands now, and then the cross. And let me tell you, they felt different. Not just clean, but somehow warmer, like they held light inside them. I carried them both back to the house, taking my time, cradling them like the precious things they were. I brought them inside and placed them on a table by my front window where the morning sun would hit them first thing every day. I found an old lace doily my mother had made and spread it beneath them, and I whispered, "Holy Mother, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You never left me. I left you, but I'm here now. I'm finally here, and thank you. Thank you for staying pure and clean, even when I buried you in my filth and anger." I stood there looking at them for the longest time. The sun was coming up, painting my kitchen in shades of gold and pink, and those impossible clean surfaces seemed to glow. How could they be spotless? 3 months in wet Iowa soil, through rain and snow and ice, and they looked brand new. It wasn't possible, but there they were. That very same week, my nephew called. He'd been estranged from the family for years, struggling with addiction. He told me he'd been clean for 90 days and wanted to reconnect. We talked for 2 hours. I hadn't laughed like that since before Sarah died. He told me stories about his recovery, about the people he'd met, about learning to forgive himself. And as I listened to him, I realized I was learning the same lesson. Dorothy came by the next day with a casserole. She stood on my porch and said, "Margaret, I don't know what you did, but something's different. The air feels lighter. I can breathe again." We sat on my porch and talked for hours, really talked, not just small talk about the weather. She told me about her own losses, her own struggles, and I listened, really listened, for the first time in years. My doctor called with test results from a scan they'd done on my lungs. They'd been worried about spots they saw 6 months earlier. He said they'd vanished, just gone. He kept saying spontaneous remission and unusual cases, but I could hear the confusion in his voice. He wanted to do more tests, to understand what happened. I told him some things can't be measured in a laboratory. The willow trees started budding again. In March, 2 months early, the birds came back. Cardinals and blue jays and even a family of robins built a nest in the lower branches. Even my old arthritic hands, the ones that could barely hold a coffee cup 3 months ago, they started working again. But the most miraculous thing, the thing that still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it, was my sister Ruth. She called me 3 weeks after I dug up that statue and crossed. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. The doctors had done a new scan before her surgery. The irregularity in her heart, the thing that had terrified them, it was gone, completely gone. They couldn't explain it. They said sometimes these things resolve themselves, but you could hear in their voices they didn't really believe that. Ruth kept saying, "Margaret, I know you prayed for me. I know you did. And this time, I didn't lie." I told her yes. Yes, I prayed to the Blessed Mother who knows what it means to suffer, who stood at the foot of the cross and watched her own child die. And someone was listening. I started baking again, something I hadn't done in years. Made my grandmother's soda bread recipe and brought it to the church potluck. People said it was the best they'd ever tasted. Pastor Holland pulled me aside after the service and just hugged me. Didn't say anything, just held me while I cried. Sometimes words aren't necessary. Life started moving again, not backward. You can never go backward, but forward. The young couple who moved in across the street started waving to me every morning. Their little boy, couldn't have been more than 5, started bringing me dandelions he'd picked from his yard. His mother apologized, said she'd tell him to stop bothering me, but I told her no, please, let him come. Those dandelions meant more to me than a dozen roses. I started volunteering at the senior center on Thursdays. Nothing major, just playing cards with folks who were lonelier than I was. Turns out, there's a lot of us out there. People who've lost everyone and forgotten how to connect, but we found each other. We found small moments of joy in a game of gin rummy or a shared piece of coffee cake. Dorothy and I started having coffee every Thursday morning. She'd bring pastries from the bakery downtown, and we'd sit on my porch and watch the world wake up. We talked about everything and nothing, about our husbands, our children, our regrets, and our hopes. She told me once, "Margaret, you saved my life." I didn't understand what she meant. She said, "I was planning to move to Arizona to be near my son, but I don't want to leave anymore. This feels like home again." People started smiling when they saw me. Conversations lasted longer. The mailman started delivering packages to my door again, even brought me a Christmas card last year. Teenagers started cutting through my yard again, and instead of annoying me, it made me feel alive, like my little corner of the world mattered to someone. Now, some folks, when I tell them this story, they wave their hands and say, coincidence. They say grief eventually lifts. That's just how time works. They say the medical stuff was bound to resolve itself. They say the willow tree was just having a natural cycle. And when I tell them about how clean that statue and cross were after 3 months underground, they say maybe the soil was different there. Maybe the rain didn't reach them. Maybe I'm misremembering how dirty they actually were. But I know different. Deep in my bones, in the part of me that used to believe before life beat it out of me, I know. I held that statue in my hands. I saw that cross. There's no natural explanation for plaster and wood staying pristine under Iowa soil through winter. None. It was a sign, clear as day, that the Blessed Mother never abandoned me, even when I abandoned her. Every single morning now, I light a candle beside that statue and cross. I don't ask for anything anymore. I don't beg or plead or make bargains. I just say thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on everything. Thank you for standing in that garden buried under dirt and anger and still protecting what was sacred. Thank you for reminding me that mercy doesn't end just because we stop believing in it. I bought a new rosary, one with blue beads, to match Mary's robes. My grandmother's old one was lost years ago, and now, every evening before bed, I pray, not the desperate prayers of my youth, begging God to change things I couldn't control, but prayers of gratitude, prayers of peace, prayers asking the Blessed Mother to watch over all the other broken-hearted mothers in this world. All the people who've buried their children and don't know how to go on. I buried the Mother of God and a sacred cross in rage and despair, convinced that heaven had turned its back on me. But they rose from that grave, spotless and pure, untouched by the filth I'd covered them with. Or maybe they helped me rise. Maybe that's what mercy looks like. Staying clean when everything around you is covered in mud. You know, I've lived 79 years on this earth. I've seen war and peace, love and loss, miracles and tragedies. And I've learned that the hardest thing in this life isn't losing what you love. It's learning to open your heart again after you've convinced yourself it's safer to keep it closed. I think about James sometimes, about what he'd say if he could see me now. He always believed, even when I didn't. Even when Sarah died, he held on to his faith with both hands. He'd kneel before that statue every night and pray the rosary, asking Mary to intercede for our daughter's soul. I used to think he was weak for that, for needing something to believe in. But now I understand, he was the strongest person I ever knew. It takes more courage to hope than it does to despair. And Sarah, my beautiful girl, I think she'd be proud of me. She always said I was too hard on myself, too quick to anger, too slow to forgive. She'd tell me, Mom, let it go, just let it go. Well, baby, I finally did. I finally let go of all that anger and all that pain. And you know what I found underneath? Love. So much love I didn't even know was still there. My grandmother, bless her soul, she knew what she was doing when she brought that statue and cross over from the old country. She knew life would knock me down. She knew I'd face days so dark I'd forget what light looked like. But she also knew that somewhere, buried deep inside me, there'd always be a spark, a tiny ember of faith that couldn't be completely extinguished. And she was right. I don't expect everyone who hears my story to believe it. Some things aren't meant to be proven in a laboratory or explained in a textbook. Some things are meant to be felt in that quiet place inside you where you keep your deepest truths. But if you're listening to my voice right now, if you made it all the way to the end of this old woman's confession, then maybe there's a reason. Maybe you needed to hear that it's never too late, that mercy is always waiting, even when we bury it. So I'm asking you now, wherever you are, whatever you're going through, do you believe that grace can find us even in our darkest moments? Have you ever experienced something that defied explanation? Something that touched you so deeply you knew it was more than just chance? Write in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Tell me your story. Tell me about the unexplainable, beautiful thing that found its way into your life when you needed it most. Because I believe we're all connected by these moments, these small miracles that remind us we're not alone in this world. And if you're carrying anger tonight, if you've buried something sacred because the pain was too much to bear, I want you to know it's not too late to dig it up. It's never too late to come home. I was 79 years old, convinced my life was over, convinced I'd die alone in that dark house with only my bitterness for company. But I was wrong. Life gave me another chance. The Blessed Mother gave me another chance. Maybe you're watching this because you're going through something right now. Maybe you lost someone you can't imagine living without. Maybe your faith is hanging by a thread. Maybe you're so tired of hurting that you've gone numb just to survive. I see you. I was you. And I'm here to tell you that the story doesn't have to end in that darkness. There's a beautiful old hymn my mother used to sing. It is well with my soul. She'd sing it while washing dishes or hanging laundry. I never understood how she could sing those words after everything she'd been through. She lost 2 children before they turned 5. She buried her own mother and father in the same year. But she'd sing, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. I can sing those words now, not because the pain is gone, it never really goes away, but because I've learned to carry it differently. I've learned that sorrow and joy can exist in the same heart, that you can miss someone with every fiber of your being and still find reasons to smile, that grief is just love with nowhere to go, and the answer isn't to stop loving, it's to find new places to pour that love. The Blessed Mother knows this better than anyone. She loved her son more than life itself, and she watched him die the most horrible death imaginable. But she didn't let that destroy her. She became the mother of the church, the mother of all of us, lost and broken souls, wandering through this world looking for home. She took her grief and turned it into compassion for every suffering soul who's ever lived. That's what I'm trying to do now. Take this pain I've carried for so long and turn it into something useful, something that helps instead of hurts. Every time I volunteer at the senior center, every time I listen to Dorothy's stories, every time I smile at that little boy bringing me dandelions, I'm honoring James and Sarah. I'm taking the love I had for them and spreading it around to people who need it just as much. God bless you all, and thank you for listening to an old woman ramble. You've given me something precious tonight. You've reminded me that my story matters, that maybe, just maybe, it'll help someone else find their way back to. Maybe it'll help someone understand that miracles don't always look like burning bushes or parted seas. Sometimes they look like a clean statue and a pristine wooden cross pulled from muddy ground. Sometimes they look like a sister's healed heart, or a tree that blooms too early, or an old woman who learns to love again. Whatever you're facing tonight, I'm praying for you, and I mean that. Every single person who took the time to listen to my story, you're in my prayers. I'll light my candle tonight and ask the Blessed Mother to watch over you, to give you the strength you need, to help you find your way home. May you find the courage to dig up whatever you've buried. May you find the strength to open your heart one more time. And may you discover, like I did, that mercy has been waiting for you all along. clean and pure, and ready to welcome you home.